staff.
Everything runs carefully and correctly, and Philip Overcash is here from staff as well.
Great. We thank the staff for their great work. We have good staff with us. I also like it's a special meeting, and not special in formality, but special. We have Mayor Tecklenburg with us, and I'm going to ask him if he'd like to say a few words, and also Rick Giroux from his office. Rick, it's always good to have you as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I came here to dispel a rumor. The Serving Planning Commission of the City of Charleston is a thankless job. And I'm going to dispel that by using two words of English language that my mother taught me were two of the most important words. Thank you. Thank you for your service. What you do is so important to the built environment of this city. Seriously. It really is. You know that, but I'm telling you publicly and acknowledging that. It's critical to our city's built environment. The city of Charleston's built environment, in my view, is the most beautiful in the world. So responsibility you have is really awesome. And I just can't thank you more from the city's point of view and me personally for the time you put into this. Your independence, the commitment to keep Charleston as beautiful as it is and can continue to become more beautiful. So God bless and thanks.
And thank you for your work too this morning. I should have said that anyone that gets up to speak today would ask you to come to the podium, identify yourself, if you represent someone, identify who that is, and give us your address. So with that, Mr. Moore, we're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda is we're going to have some updates from our planning director, Mr. Robert Summerfield. Summerfield, good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Thank you for having me. As I committed to and as you all have kind of requested, this is my every other month kind of update on just where we're at in the planning department, some of the things we're working on, some of the things more specifically that you all might have to look forward to as things that we know are going to be coming before you soon. On your desk today, for any member of the public who's interested in seeing it, it is available through the city's website on the Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability page. We prepared our end-of-year report for 2022. That end-of-year report will take you through some of the highlights of some of the work that's been done, and it is comprehensive for the entire department. So, it covers everything from the work that our Business and Neighborhood Services Office has been doing, the Office of Minority and Women-Owned Enterprises, as well as what we're doing in zoning, what we're doing in the preservation team, as well as obviously the planning team that supports this board. Some things of note, I think, from the past year that I'd like to just point out is quite a bit of work has been done. Specifically, you all worked on and our team worked on updates to our ADU ordinance to make the availability of accessory dwelling units more accessible to people, more people having the ability to take advantage of that opportunity for their property and do what is often called quiet density. We know we have an affordability issue. We know that density is a concern, but quiet density means that we're not really impacting the neighborhood by providing an opportunity for that, just that one additional unit that most of our neighborhoods can accommodate that one additional unit without it being a burden or concern. So that was a big one. We've also had the use of the city plan. So again, the Planning Commission worked extensively, staff worked extensively on bringing to the council a comprehensive plan that they adopted in 2022, 2021. But in 2022, we've been using the plan quite extensively in a lot of the work we're doing. But specifically, it's helping to inform the water plan that our Office of Resilience is working on, and the team has been working very closely with that team. We have Molly here this evening as our annexation planner. That was a big win for us last year in terms of getting council approval for that budget to bring in that position and work with our communities, particularly in West Ashley and Johnson, James Island, where we have these donut holes, where we have inconsistent service levels. And I think that's been a big win for the city and the department over the year. Additionally, you have the 2023 work plan. So these are the things that we are aiming towards for this coming year. Please take a look at that. I think there's a lot of important things we're working on. We are finally, after I've been here just about 2 years now, we are finally, after a lot of work, we are moving forward with the zoning rewrite. That consultant has been hired, contract has been approved by council, and we're hoping to get that work actually kicked off in earnest here within the next couple of months. So that's a big one, and that one is going to be a multi-year project. Planning Commission is going to be actively involved. So a big project there. Another project that's in that work plan, and another, again, it's been a little bit of a lift to get us to the point to get it started, is the Peninsula Plan, or the new downtown plan, if you would. That's another big project that we, council actually allocated additional funds for in this past budget approval, which has helped us. And we're just about to the point where we'll have a contract before council, I think within the next month, to get that effort underway. And again, get that work kicked off. I think that's going to be a very important effort. Additionally, again, because the comprehensive plan and implementing that comprehensive plan is an important piece of the work that we're doing, we're continuing to work to identify, document, and collaborate with our settlement communities on what that means to be a settlement community and a part of the city. Because in too many cases in the past, we haven't actually talked about what that intersection looks like. And we have gotten some grant funding for this year, and so we'll be taking that dialogue that began during the comprehensive planning process to the next level with doing that work, with reaching out and communicating and having very robust conversation with folks in our settlement communities about what they see their community being in the future versus what maybe in the past we have seen their community being in the future. So those are some of the big things that we're working on for 2023. One of the big projects is not a part of our work plan per se, but it's going to be a part of our work. Has been a part of our work, honestly, for the last 6-9 months, is the Union Pier project. I think we've all heard quite a bit about that. Obviously, this planning commission has already been in the thrux of it. You've had at least one informational meeting about Union Pier and what their proposal and project is. One of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was just to make sure that you all know that there's a lot of work coming your way related to this. We all know that the PUD is coming, but in addition to the PUD, we are working with the Union Pier team to do some additional planning commission informational workshops. This is a big thing for the community. There's a lot of things that are in their plan that is going through, it's been submitted for TRC, so they are in the process of going through their first technical review committee set of comments, and the city staff is hard at work using those comments in time for that meeting. I think they're going to meet March 1st or 2nd, I think, is when that TRC meeting will happen, which is an important milestone because that's their first official response from the city on what they've submitted thus far. So that'll be important. In the meantime, though, because that planning unit development, that PUD will be coming to Planning Commission, we're working closely with them on some workshops. One of those will be around them talking about the sustainability components and the resiliency components of their plan and how those function. Obviously, this is a sensitive site. There's a lot of things that they're going to be doing relative to resiliency and sustainability. And so we want them to be able to take a little bit of extra time to be able to share that information with the Planning Commission. And then something that might end up being a little unique is we're also looking to do, right now, we're looking at a joint workshop between the CD, the Community Development Committee of City Council, and the Planning Commission to talk about what the port has proposed for their workforce housing commitment as a part of their budget. We all know that there's no statutory obligation or ordinance obligation. There is definitely a community expectation of addressing workforce housing in any planned unit development that comes before this board. This board has been very vocal in their concern and commitment to ensuring that our zoning is addressing affordable. So we're looking at doing some kind of workshop as well, because the board has proposed not 100% unique, but a different spin on the way that they would like to address workforce housing as a part of their development. And so we want them to come and explain that to the CD committee and council, as well as the planning commission, in advance of when that PUD would come forward to the planning commission. So we have a number of those informational type meetings or workshops that we're all working with them on. Additionally, we acknowledge, we had that informational workshop a couple months ago now, and it was quite clear in the turnout of people who just wanted to come in and listen in. We all know that this is important to the community, but that exemplified how much folks at least want to be a part of this process in terms of observing the process, listening, hearing everything. So we're also going to be looking to do, when that PUD comes forward officially to the Planning Commission, we will be looking to do that as a special meeting and in a special space. So it will not be in the public meeting room. This is a great space for our day-to-day business, but this is going to be something that is going to attract quite a bit of interest from the community, as it should. And so we want to make sure we have a space that can accommodate that and allow you all to have a clear deliberation on what that project is, as you are hearing from not just the applicant, but the community as well. So all of that is stuff to look forward to. With that, I'm open to any questions if you have them about what the department is doing and the things that we are looking forward to over the next few months.
Thank you, Robert. And I tell you, it's a union peer issue, something we want as much information as we can get ahead of time so we can absorb it and understand it and ask questions. So I think that's, as Mayor Tecklenburg said, we got to get this right.
Yes.
It was that important. We want to make sure, not just take our time, but make sure we get everything we need, all the information. Questions from commission members? Ms. Jacobs?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm really excited that you're considering exactly what the chairman pointed out, because I attended the Preservation Society meeting in the Cedar Room for the new Preservation Society. If that's any indication from one organization about how many people are very concerned about it, I'm probably going to need the full Gilliard upstairs for meetings, because it was packed room and there was a lot of people who really have some thoughts and concerns about that. So I'm very excited to hear we're already considering ahead of time those kind of preparations so we don't get overwhelmed. In addition, I'm excited to hear we're going to do a workshop on resiliency, because I learned during our tour of Union Pier several things that were done with the Cooper, resiliency and drainage improvements and stuff like that. But I think the community as a whole needs that, and we need to learn the potential of what can be done and how it will. But also to instruct us so we make the best decisions there. So I'm really excited that I've heard that and seen that, and we're setting that up for us in the future.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you for this report, and I want to say thank you to the mayor specifically for the annexation coordinator position. I pass on to council. I think we're all really happy at every meeting. We're looking at 5, 7, sometimes 10 new annexations. So very grateful for that as a citizen.
Pushing it hard.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Mayor. And on the back to Union Pier, and I echo everything that's already been said, and I'm very grateful for the offer to engage with the CD committee on the affordable housing issue. I know that's a concern that we all have, and on the sustainability water management issue. And one thing that I think would be good if we could have as a part of that discussion, so that we have a wider lens to look at what they're doing, is some sort of update on the overall peninsula. I don't know what the term to call it. Is it the seawall or the whatever the Corps of Engineers project is? Because I think those two things are going to work together, and there'll be a system. So I think it would be good if I don't think we've ever had a formal presentation on that as a commission, and I think it's important to be able to consider that as a part of the overall project. And then lastly, and those two things are very important, affordability and sustainability, but I think also we don't want to short shrift just the basic issues of density, height, and the public space that's being proposed. And maybe that's a separate informational session. I don't know. I'll let you all decide that, but I don't want that to get lost because that's really what we're hearing in the community. What I'm hearing anyway is, so we need to. I would like us to be able to consider that and have a discussion with the union peer team about that, and have the public have an opportunity to participate in that. So.
Absolutely. I apologize. I'm remiss. I should have mentioned that one of the things we are looking at, do we do that something on the, their urban design philosophy, which is that, right, and the massing and some of those conversations as a part of the resiliency workshop, or, again, these workshops, they're too long, things get lost. So do we break it up into two, one that does resiliency, one that does something on their urban design philosophy that they put forth in the plan currently. So yes, that's absolutely on the table, and it's part of what we're looking at. And I think it is really important, back to Ms. Jacobs' comments on the resiliency, for them to explain how, and for the community to hear how their sustainability and resiliency efforts will actually accommodate their portion, if you would, of the perimeter protection system that's being contemplated. And I know I saw Christopher taking some notes. We will get Mr. Morris, our Chief Resiliency Officer. We'll get with him and schedule some time. He can give an update, not just on where we're at with the perimeter protection process, but also just the water plan as well. I know that has been, the integration of that plan with all these other efforts has been something that the community has been really interested in. So we'll make sure we get something like this.
Thank you, Ms. Sane. Ms. Lepsis?
I concur with everything that my fellow commissioners have voiced, but I'm kind of going to hit the elephant in the room a little bit. Could we get sort of a timeline in this process? Because from everything that we've read and heard recently, it is thought to be pushing through faster than what the community would like. And so if we could have a timeline of expectations so that we know what we're looking at and the time we have, and that's transparent to the public and not just shocking.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, Commissioner, the court has put forth a timeline of their best hope, which they had initially hoped that they could get through the necessary hearings to get this introduced to the City Council by June. Now we have pushed back on that timeline is probably a little too aggressive. So what we told them is we the city aren't prepared to commit to any kind of timeline until they completed the initial TRC process that's required for the PUD. Because are they going to be able to get everything addressed that needs to be addressed through the technical review committee in the first meeting and have everything kind of wrapped up at the second meeting? As we all know, that's part of the requirement for PUD is that it goes through at least 2 rounds of TRC. So, we made it clear that we can't even set the special meeting for the Planning Commission until we have a sense of where this is through the TRC process. Once we do have that, then we can nail down, and it's going to take a little lead time because we do actually want to try to get the ballrooms for that Planning Commission hearing. We've also been very upfront and honest that we're not, there's no commitment on the city's part that it's a one in action at Planning Commission. I mean, this is a very significant and very complex plan unit development. And so the idea that we would necessarily have Planning Commission action, particularly given the extent of what we expect to have from the public hearing on that, let's not count any, chickens before those eggs are hatched. So we've made it very clear from the city's perspective that while we know that they have an ambitious timeline, and we want to support where they're going, they are an important component to our state and local economy. We want to make sure that the port is able to get ultimately the resources that they need to do the work that they need to do for all of us. We also have to protect the city of Charleston and her people and make sure that we do this process right. So while they have a timeline, that is not necessarily the city's timeline. Unfortunately, though, right now there's a couple things that have to happen before we can say definitively, here's the date it's going to get planning commission. Here's the date we might expect it at city council, and so on and so forth.
Ms. Jacobs?
I have one more question that you just alerted me to. There's been some discussion that this resiliency aspect of this planned unit development will be very expensive, and that there's some discussion about seeing funding coming through a TIF that could be organized. How does the timeline of TIF fit into the discussion of HUD, and how will that influence the two discussions? How do you see that?
So I'm not sure that the TIF would necessarily impact or impede the HUD. It is definitely a necessity in order for this development to occur that there is a TIF. The infrastructure costs, and these are public infrastructure costs, will just be so significant that in order to do this, because again, it's not an overly infrastructure location currently. It will require significant infrastructure to produce the results that are currently planned. So yes, they are working on proposing what they believe the TIF will be. I don't believe the city yet has received that. It's a parallel process to the HUD. I don't think though that we need to have the TIF in place in order for the HUD to go through, but we do need some of that information because one of the conversations has been, the extent to the development to pay for the infrastructure. What is that? What does that look like? What is that comparison? And so I think they're collectively all like to have a sense of that, even if that part of the work is not completed at the time that the budget comes through.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just one more brief comment based on Ms. Lumpus's comment, and I'm grateful for your comments about the timeline. And I would just urge us all to focus on allowing the process to dictate the timeline rather than some arbitrary deadline. Mr. Mayor, I think your letter, this Sunday paper really helped reset expectations in the community. And I think for this project to ultimately be successful, which we as citizens of the city want whatever gets built there to be successful, process has to have credibility. And I think the process needs to drive the timeline rather than some external factor.
Thank you, Commission members. Any other commission members?
Just to add on to what Harry mentioned a few minutes ago, I would not bury a workshop on design philosophy within a sustainability or whatever the resiliency. I think that is the issue. I think that's the issue in the community.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? If not, thank you, Mr. Summerfield, for coming with us. We appreciate the updates and look forward to working with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan, I'm going to take the minutes at the end of the meeting. Okay. Mr. Morgan, the first item on the agenda is rezonings of 155 Indian Street, downtown Peninsula, TMS number 45708 from 2011 to 12111 and 112 up to 1.91 acres. Fresh rezoning from accommodations of A4, Phase A and 4, to 6-story city height district to accommodations overlay, and 3, 5, 7-story over city height district, small.
And this is a fairly large parcel here in the center of our city. I think you all are very familiar with the site. The bulk of the site is comprised of what people commonly refer to as the Days End site, which is right here at Meeting and Horlbeck Alley. And requests here first to get the existing inn, which is I believe permitted for about 124 rooms, to be part of a future location for accommodations in our 150 space accommodations overlay district. That's the A5. So that would be a change. It's already in the accommodations zone, but we take it to the A5 to A5 district. And then some changes to the height that would involve taking the area of the site that is in the 6-story district to the 7-story district, and we'll have some maps that show that in a minute. And then a portion of the site that is in the 4-story district to the 5-story district, and then another portion of the site that is in the 4-story district to a 3-story district. And that will be the request that is before you tonight. Again, you all are all familiar with where this site is. It's in the heart of our city. It is in, and here's an image also that gives you a sense of where the 7-story heights are, and the request or the 7-story request is, this is the 6-story district at present, and the 7-story request is here. And then we have the 5-story that is up front on Meeting Street, as is very common. It is the request to go from 4 to 5 in that location, and then the request to go from 4 to down to 3, which is a reduction in this location here. So those are the changes that they're proposing on the site from a height standpoint. The aerial image that we have of the property, again, is the Days Inn here, as well as parking lots that are a part of the Days Inn, and the parking lots that are to the rear that have been leased spaces that have access to Pearlbeck Alley, and ultimately connects up to Market Street there, and goes back up to buildings that front on King Street. In our comprehensive plan, this is in our city center area, so that is the area that has the most intense uses, the greatest heights, things like that. And this has always been part of that district. Centers call for, again, the most intensity there. The accommodation zone at present on the peninsula, this is what is in the accommodation zone, shown in blue. And then the different areas that have other designations beyond just the basic 50 rooms are shown with the different A2s, A3s, and in the instance of what they are requesting here, the A5s, which is the kind of purple color, which is in a number of different other locations in town and would be added in this location here. The nearest nearby location that is a A5, I believe, is over on Market Street, the First Baptist lot that is over on Market Street here to there. To orient you to the site from a street standpoint, and you're all probably very familiar with this site, the old Days Inn site. The office building to the south is here, right on Pearlbeck. Here's a view looking to the south. Again, this is a 6-story building here that was built, I think, in the 80s, so a fairly substantial structure there. This is looking down Pearlbeck. Now, Pearlbeck is a fairly narrow right of way. It's only about 20 feet here. The sidewalks really don't exist on the northern side. It's just a utility easement right there. And on the southern side, they're typically covered in these arcades that are part of the office building, and then it's associated parking deck here. And this part of our analysis on the site is the concern about how narrow this is and getting a little bit more space between this future building and the fairly large building here and this parking deck that's back here. For you all, as you consider height district changes, it is important to remember, and we've talked about this before, but I'm just bringing it up because each time you all have a height district change, it's incumbent on us to different criteria, is that the height district rezone is subject to be evaluated in part on the context of the property, the character of the immediate area, the street widths around the property, and whether the requested rezoning will be compatible with surrounding properties. It's also important to note, and this is straight from the ordinance, so we've got several sections here, is that any heights that are 5 stories or more have to have a sidewalk that is at least 10 feet in depth. And if it's not provided at present, the developer will have to back their building up and provide that sidewalk area. And then also, there is the allowance, for instance, in the 7-story district, that if someone wanted to, if in this instance the developer is successful in having the 7 stories approved on the site, that they could also request an additional story based on architectural merit and context. And they'll talk to you a little bit about that, but I think that is ultimately a part of their overall plan on the site, taking that to the BAR. for extra story by height, or by merit, excuse me. So these existing streets, have several large buildings. Of course, the 6-story to the left that is shown shrouded in some renovation scaffolding here in the street view we have here. And then we've got some 4- and 5-story buildings that are across the street, in addition to the 2-story of the existing hotel, and then further down 3- and 4-story buildings. What you see in this image below is some of the massing of how 5 stories could work on the site. Again, the limit at present is 4 stories along this front portion of the site, and the request from the applicant is to go up to 5 stories for the portion that is on the southern end of the site, and then they would reduce from 4 to 3 for this area right here that's adjacent to another historic structure to the north. This is an image that shows straight on looking down Horlbeck. Again, the 6-story structure on the left, the current building on the site, and then this is the building as shown with 5 stories here, and ultimately to the rear, the 7 stories would be on here, which don't really show, they wouldn't really be visible to a pedestrian from Meeting Street in a location like this. But this also shows you one of the things that we've been concerned about, which is the potential for canyonization of the side streets. And in fact, when the zoning ordinance heights were changed, that provision about the sidewalks was added in part because of concern about how the side streets, the east-west streets, could get canyonized. And so this requirement would mean that the 10 feet would be added to what is the current distance between the buildings. Essentially, this is about 20 feet right now. With the 10-foot sidewalk requirement going up, this would end up being about a 30-foot zone, which would give a little bit more breathing room for these buildings and a little bit more light. Of course, the light, of course, is curtailed by the building on the south side that's already there, a 6-story structure. But it would give the opportunity for that light to get a little bit closer down to the street and the sidewalk, and just a little bit more distance between the buildings.
Christopher, is that depicted in that rendering, the extra 10?
I'm going to show you an image that gives a little bit more sense of that. And here is the alley is 20 feet wide, and this is scaled out. This is an extra 10 feet, which would go about 10 feet into the current building. So this gives you a sense of how this goes up here and is laid out here. And the applicants have provided this previous image that shows, I believe this is close to 30 feet, but the applicants can answer that a little bit more. But our one recommendation on this, beyond just the overall approval, is that they provide a minimum 10-foot space there along Horlbeck for, not changing the height in that 10-foot area immediately adjacent to Horlbeck, to make sure that we get this with any kind of extra height on the building, is that we get this backed up. And again, somehow the building ended up being built at 4 stories or less. That is not required. We still require sidewalks, but not to the 10-foot depth. So is this kind of answering your question for how that relates?
And I know it's just a rendering. I was just curious what it depicted.
Absolutely. So this is also from the applicant. This is a survey of the property, and it shows that out front, they've got a very generous sidewalk already. It's 11 feet, so they won't have a problem being able to provide that 10-foot depth in the front of the property. So that's going to go well there. So the height districts as proposed, again, is the change here to 7 stories from the 6. And again, they have shown on this diagram here, the 10-foot zone setback from Horlbeck. There is some, I guess, a little bit of disagreement about the 5-story area. We would like to see this shown also with the 10-foot setback, but their request showed it going to 4 feet. So that would be, staff recommended change that it be 10 feet all the way along Horlbeck here. And then the applicants have also said they would reduce from 4 to 3 in this location here. From a staff standpoint, we're neither here nor there on that, but we understand that that's something the neighborhoods are very interested in, so we wouldn't say no to that if the neighborhoods are interested in it. That essentially is what you're getting on the height changes, that is our recommendation. And then we are also comfortable with the change in the accommodations overlay from the A1 to the A5, which allows for 150 rooms. Again, they've got 124 on the site at present. And with that, we're recommending approval along with the 10-foot setback along the hallway.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm James Wilson with Miles and Bond Business Center, 5 Exchange Street, here on behalf of the applicant. And with me today is Brad Cook, who's here on behalf of ownership, and Steve Ramos, who's our local architect working on the project. Before Steve and I try to take you through, try to share with you what we're trying to accomplish on this site, redeveloping this site. I'm going to let Brad just very quickly introduce himself so that you all can have a face with the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brad Cook. I'm a strategic property partner to the developer of this project. Our address is 615 Channelside Drive, 2204 Tampa, Florida. Thank you for your time tonight. Would you mind queuing up the next slide? So early on in our process, we found an image of looking south from the intersection of Broad and Beaton Street, and it showed a great kind of perspective of our site in the distance from what's some of your most important streets at Beaton Street and Broad, in the Springs Great Civic Building. And so we've referred to that project from the beginning as a reminder to us that we're building in a special place with a street and amongst a community that's passionate about ensuring that special character is not lost. We're committed to creating something worthy of that context. We believe Great itself to be a great, wonderful civic building, a gathering place, and a point of pride for not only to visit Charleston, but also to visit our home. To deliver the project, we've assembled a pretty incredible team of local and national consultants. Morris Ashby is the design architect out of New Orleans, who had a good portion of working with them on 2 projects in Tampa. They've had success creating some really special projects here in Charleston that you've heard of locally or with James mentioned since renovation. So probably don't know a little bit about us being Tampa based, but our development company has built a reputation for commitment to design excellence, and we're very strong emphasis on quality in the public realm. For us, that's the most important part of what we do. It's how we connect with the place where we're working and how we build long-term value, not only for us, but for the community that we build in. Last 11 months, we've met with over 30 different times with local stakeholder groups to listen to their thoughts about what thoughtful redevelopment is like. And while we know there will be some opposition to our project, we are encouraged by the support and feedback from many neighbors and community groups that are closest to the project. We're grateful for their feedback, which has informed the concept. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish here and why we think it fits in the context, obviously the starting point is the current conditions as you've seen as the days in motel. It's going to look obviously least attractive buildings in our city. But more than that, this area, this piece of Meeting Street, is in a lot of ways it's a somewhat lifeless, inactive location. Particularly, if any of us walk that piece, in the early evening. And part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring some mixed use and some vibrancy to this piece. There's a little bit of a missing piece there in our view on Meeting Street. Quality, of course, as Brad said, is paramount. One thing we want to do is we want to add a residential component to this. So we're going to do a hotel project, but also with a residential piece of it as well, units. And that's something that you all know is part of the city's goals, part of our comprehensive plan. We all know that, over the latter half of the second half of the 20th century, population on the peninsula, cut basically in half. And one of the things that the city is trying to do is to encourage more residential use on the peninsula where people live and work and be around places. The other piece of it too that Brad alluded to is the public realm. We're trying to create some great pedestrian connectivity and experience there. And ultimately, talked a lot with the city staff about this in the neighborhoods, about ways to get better pedestrian connections through here because there's not very good connectivity there right now. Quarterback Alley, of course, it's always been just that, an alley. And looking at the old Sanborn map, you see it used to be just an alley with some automotive repair type businesses on it. It's not a good pedestrian experience, obviously, and that's part of what we're trying to accomplish, and Steve will describe that more. We're very grateful to everybody who spent a lot of time meeting with our group and the city staff, many times, that the French Quarter, Charleston Village, Ansonburg neighborhood. We've had contact with Charlestown Association, offered to do an action with them. And of course, the Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society. And while, as always, there's, everybody's not 100% on the same page. We feel like the feedback we've gotten and we've tried to incorporate into our plan has been really valuable and that the process is working the right way. So we'll speak to the very specific zoning requests, the zoning requests that we're asking for to accomplish our goals here. The first one, as was more described, is to we're already in the accommodations overlay, but to change to A5 zone, which will allow up to 150 potential. We currently have 124 on the property. So when we looked at this, we deliberately wanted to look at what we think is a reasonable increase. Ms. Morgan, would you mind just going to the slide that shows the different parcels? Just I'd like to plan for this to be able to see that maybe back in your, back in your.
The opposite direction.
Maybe it's very first slide. No, sorry, your.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, this one?
Back one.
Okay.
Reverse.
Okay, gotcha. Here it is.
Awesome, thank you. And the reason why I just want to thank you for this is that the large parcel that fronts on Meeting Street, that's the DayZ. The three pieces behind it are part of this project. So as you see, we're increasing the size of the land by about 50%. All of those parcels are already in the accommodations overlay, which is just to say that we currently have 124. That property is zoned for and could accommodate 1 or 2 50-room hotels. What we're proposing is to go from 124 to 150 for the whole just one more hotel-related point out. Everybody's rightly always concerned about parking. We are going to, of course, handle all of the parking on site within the property. In addition to meeting the requirements for parking, we also intend to have additional parking. So just like there's some current public parking in this lot behind, we're going to have some additional public parking as part of this as well. Okay, with that said, I'm going to let Steve walk us through the actual design concept of what we're looking for, and we'll take it from there. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Ramos, and I'm an architect here in Charleston. And it's a real privilege to work on a project of this magnitude. It's not Union Pier, but it's a really big project for our team, and so we're very. So I'm going to talk mostly about heights. I think James covered the hotel request pretty well. But in some instances, we're asking to lower the height on the map. In other instances, we're asking to increase it. And that has been a very deliberate and thoughtful process. And we feel like it's most responsive to the context as opposed to responding to the current zoning map. So I'm going to talk a lot about context and just point out some things that we felt like were important to this decision. Next slide, please. Again, everybody knows the site. We just wanted to reiterate that this very much is a centrally located site. Mr. Morgan talked about the prevailing belief that height is the spine of the peninsula, and we're right there. We're the spine of the spine. Next. We thought it was important to highlight that although our building will front on Meeting Street, it's also very close to King Street. And so that connection between King and Meeting is something that's really important to us. as in terms of pedestrian experience, as well as the appropriateness of height and setbacks. We also note that Meeting Street really is our civic street in Charleston. Everybody knows we refer. I think the architecture in many cases is more grand on Meeting Street, and that's something that we feel like is important for our development as well. Next slide. Again, here's the site. Everybody knows the Days Inn. As Mr. Wilson pointed out, this development will also include the parking lot behind the Days Inn that you see there. I also wanted to point out some properties or details about the context. So we're at the corner of Meeting and Hurlbeck. The office building there is six stories right at Meeting Street, and then it has a mechanical penthouse that is approximately 2 stories tall. And probably most people don't pay much attention to that penthouse because of its setback. The office building across Meeting on the bottom of the page, kind of with the white roof, that's a 4-story structure. And then the office building across Cumberland is 5 stories. So that corner has 4, 5, and 6. We're proposing a 5-story structure at that corner, and we feel like that is very much within the context. But I also want to point out there's a really beautiful pink building to the north. That is the Meeting Street Inn. That is an important historic structure. That building is 3 stories. And so we are deliberately downzoning or asking to downzone the site to 3 stories to respect the history of it and respect the height along Meeting Street. So again, 3 stories at that northeast corner where we're adjacent to the historic Meeting Street Inn. And then once we are, I think, 75 feet from our property line, that is where we are requesting the 5-story change, which we feel like, again, is very much in keeping with the context that already exists. Slide. And these are some images along Meeting Street. I think probably the most important is that top right image, which again, you see the Meeting Street Inn, which is a beautiful 3-story Charleston single house. And then you see the 6-story office building at the corner. And so we have deliberately modeled our development to really respond to that context. I also want to talk just briefly about the Charleston Place. Whether you love it or hate it or somewhere in between, I think that building does handle mass and at the street level pretty well. They have a 4-story structure. And then there is an 8-story mass that is pushed back 50 feet from the street. And of course, it is visible. We're not saying that it disappears, but for many instances at the street level, that mass is not really imposing. But that mass is about 50 feet from Meeting Street. The 7-story mass that we are proposing is going to be a full 100 feet back from Meeting Street. So double the distance that you see of the Charleston Place Hotel. Next slide. Of course, Hurlbeck Alley, which unfortunately is not one of our best streets, as Mr. Morgan pointed out. It's actually at the intersection is 24 feet wide, and there is a sidewalk if you're very skinny. You can kind of shimmy across the curb on the north side, or you can walk through a parking garage or under an office building. So we're going to be putting a real sidewalk, and we're going to be burying power lines. We're going to be putting active uses along Hurlbeck Alley, and I truly believe it will be transformative, and that will slowly become a street that I think you will want to walk down, and you might go shopping or maybe go to a restaurant. Next slide. This is a street wall analysis, and I know it's hard to read from where you're at. One of the things we realized when we started to really analyze the context is that there were taller structures or pieces of buildings that we had not originally recognized. So for example, the Mills House, which is a 7-story structure on King and Meeting. Of course, we've always seen that, but there's an 8-story penthouse that's set back from the street that's really not as visible. There's also a county office building next to the courthouse that's 7 stories in the middle of the block. We've already talked about the office building across the street as well as the Charleston Place. And my point in highlighting these is to say that the things that we are requesting already exist in our context. And in many instances, that height is placed in a way that is not any issue or encumbrance to the context. And we feel like what we're going to propose in terms of setbacks and mass is going to be appropriate. And we're also prepared to deliver very exceptional architecture as well. And so I wanted to point that out on this slide. Next slide. Conceptual site plan. We've kind of listed a number of the goals for the project, one of which is really enhancing the pedestrian experience at the site. I think Meeting Street already is a great site, but what's lacking here is active uses, retail, restaurant, things of that nature, which we will be putting on the site. Pearlback Alley, I think I've beat Pearlback up enough, but again, you're going to be creating a true sidewalk, airing power lines, putting active uses. Another important concept to this development is along the western property line, where we're going to be creating what we think is going to be Charleston's next great alley. As you all know, we have many great alleys in Charleston, and we're going to be taking that space between our building and the King Street buildings and creating a beautiful hardscape and landscape alley. It is also going to have active uses, most likely an all-day restaurant and spa. We kind of think of it like Unity Alley when it had the crates, where you have little places to go along the alley, as well as Hudson Alley, which is where Coast and Rue de Jean are located. So that pedestrian experience is very important to this project, and we're just confident that it's going to be just a tremendous addition to Charleston. And last but not least, the idea of walking through Fulton Lane from King Street and walking through the courtyard in our property and passing right through the lobby is something that is going to be something that can occur almost like Charleston Place. Many of you may traverse Charleston Place when you're cutting through the block. So that's something that we're going to promote and we think is going to be pretty exceptional about this project. Next slide. There's just a few more. The current height districts as they are today are 4 stories along Meeting, 6 stories once you get 50 feet back from Meeting Street. And this is a building that could occur. We are not proposing that building, but these are developments that do occur in Charleston. We felt like this specific response wasn't good enough, and we felt like we wanted to deliver something that was more responsive and more custom to the context. Next slide. And so what we're proposing in that dark red, that is a 3-story mass. And again, being sensitive to the historic building to the north is important. And then at the southeast corner, that is a 5-story mass. And then that H shape that you see there, that will be 7 stories. And I know that this is not really a design review, but we felt it was important to share our intent and how we intend to break this up into smaller pieces, and that we've been very deliberate about these height requests. Next slide. This is a site section cut east-west through the property with Meeting Street on the right. King Street is on the far left. Again, you can see that there is a 5-story structure along Meeting Street, and based off of the setback of 100 feet, that 7-story mass will be largely obstructed when you're along Meeting Street. And even when we have the 3-story mass, the 7-story structure will be largely obstructed. Now, it will not be invisible. There will be places in the city where you will see the building. But I think what's most important from an urban design perspective is that presence along the street. And then along King Street, of course, that is equally important. The mass of the building will be at least 125 feet back from King Street, where it will be, largely obstructed and not visible. Next slide. Actually, if you could go back one, you can go forward. I just wanted to point out that a large amount of parking for the project will be underground. And by doing so, we're able to free up a lot of space at grade for things like commercial, retail, and restaurants. Next slide. And this, again, is the existing zoning map, the 4 and 6 stories. And then this is the proposition we have with 3 stories in the northeast corner, 5 in the southeast corner, and then 7 kind of in that center square of the block. Next. And then these are massing views. So this is looking south on Meeting Street. So Market Street would be kind of behind you. And so our development is on the right. You can see the Meeting Street Inn in the foreground to the right. And again, you can see how we deliberately masked our building to kind of reflect the scale of the Meeting Street Inn. And then it pops up at the corner. And I think corners are areas also that can really handle height. And so we feel like that was most appropriate. Next. And as we get closer and closer to the building, we will start to see the top of the 7-story map, at least 100 feet back from the street. Next. And you can see again, as you get closer, you start to see parts of it. We're also planning with pretty significant setback along the north property line to again create space between the historic structure and our development. Next. So this is an elevation view, or let's call it an elevation perspective. It's really not a view you can see unless you were remove the building across the street, but we feel it was effectively showed our massing strategy in relation to the context and the setbacks. Next. So we're kind of moving south. There's the intersection of Hurlbeck and Meade. I'm sorry, that's the entrance into the development between the 3 and 5-story buildings. Next slide. And that is Hurlbeck there. Next. In north, so the office building on 151 Meeting Street is in the foreground as well. And we feel like with this scale and mass, we'll kind of complete Meeting Street. The Daisy creates a void. And city streets should be defined by buildings, and we feel like this is going to be a great positive. Next. So this is one more in the south looking north. Next. That I think covers our presentation. This again is the zoning map. Thank you for the additional time. We really appreciate it. Again, it's a big project for our team, and it's been a long time coming here. And we really appreciate any feedback, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think we'll leave that until we respond to other folks who want to speak.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, the historical, this emphasis, remember Mayor Maybe Tettenberg, the White Horse Inn over there. Think about that property. When you went around, but anyway, you're too young for your daddy with it, Mr. Taylor. That was Westendorf's place later. Is anyone in support of the application who would like to speak? We do have 3 letters that were included in our package of support that the commission members got. Anyone in opposition to the application? Yes. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Come on up. Mr. Whitman, how do you say?
I'm Rick Whitman. I'm chairman of Charming Inns. I own Wentworth Mansion, John Rutledge House, Kings Courtyard Inn, Cove Lane Inn. I'm here because of Kings Courtyard Inn and Fulton Lane Inn, which I have developed since 1983. Revitalization. And that parking lot that you see, half of it gone, is part of that revitalization for King Street. I opened in 1983 before Charleston Place. Everybody thought I was crazy. What are you doing on King Street, right? It's been a very successful street. I have the rights to 63 spaces in that parking lot, of which half of those spaces will be taken up by a 7-story building. I think that you've heard how the historic building of Meeting Street Inn with 3 stories has been respected. And I feel like we've not been respected on King Street. All the way from Harbeck Alley, I have 6 of those buildings that directly abut a 7-story parking garage and residences as it's proposed. Everything along there is 3 stories. They have proposed an alley. That alley is 12.5 feet wide. I don't call that an alley. Dominated by a 6 or 7-story garage. And they say that they're connecting to King Street. Those 2 areas that they talk about are my property. The setback along that and the respect for the 3-story buildings, I don't think is there. Also, another issue is that Harbeck Alley, you've seen it, it's 20 feet wide. It's going to be a canyon like New York City. 360 space garage already exists, and now we're going to propose 250 more. 600 tons on basically a one-way street, and you've driven down Harbeck Alley, trying to get onto King Street, it's impossible. So 600 cars on a 1-block street. I would ask, let me say, I am 110% in favor of 4 seasons, 150 zoning variants. I think that further consideration needs to be sent to all the property owners along King Street with just a 12.5 foot setback, with a building dominating over us. I feel like that's going to impact, I have 86 guest rooms, half of them are on the back. You want to look out your window of the guest room, and look at a 7-story building, 12 feet long. I think it's going to be detrimental to my business. I want to work with this project very much. I'm totally in favor of this project. I don't think we've been given fair consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Anyone else in opposition to the application like to speak? Come on up, sir. That was the deal.
Good evening, I'm Joe McGowan. I live on that First Street, Harbeck Alley. And this is John McGordy. We both live in, there's one residential building on Harbeck Alley, that's 8-unit condominium. So,
Right. And then what do they go?
yes, thank you. And I'd like to echo what the owner of the King Street Hotels was saying. We're going to be in a real canyon. And when I see those pictures of what the sidewalk will be down here, it's very unclear to me that it's going to be 10 feet wide. It looks like maybe it's going to be 4 feet wide in some sections, especially in the corner here. But if you ever try to walk down Harbeck Alley, now it's pretty impossible. And I'm not sure how the cars are going to work getting into this parking garage. Is the entrance to the parking garage on Harbeck Alley, or is it on Meeting Street?
They'll answer that. They'll hold that question. They'll answer.
Okay, so if it is 600 cars between the existing garage and this new garage, it's really hard already right now. So adding that many cars again is a really, really horrible situation.
And the comment was made that there were, of the 250 spaces, or whatever the number ultimately becomes, beyond the hotel's needs, there'd be some public, additional public parking available. This parking structure here, and I've never gotten to count, I've never seen this over a demand beyond, 3/4 of this garage. At most have I ever seen it. And since we back up to we know what's going on in that garage. There is ample parking available for the public here. And if it would take away a story of parking here,
level that would be designated for public or whatever. I just think what is earmarked for public, I wonder if that ultimately isn't for the hotel, because this is always available. And so it's just much of the same, and, earmarking additional parking that's not going to be utilized for public purposes. It's not being utilized right. And we've got a 3-story building that is going to be ultimately I would say in the shadow of, not in the sun's direction, but it's going to be a 7-story building right across the street. Right across the street.
Yes, sir.
And again, we'd love to see anything with the day's end. So again, we're for a project. It's just, we live there, and our fellow owners within 15 Holmwood Valley do care.
Well, thank you for coming out tonight. Anyone else in opposition? Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name is James Floyd, resident of the city and a member of Circular Church, which is diagonally across from the site for the last 45 years. Been working on the preservation of that church for quite some time. One of the things that we've noted over time with these office buildings on either side of this is just how much of a canyon we are already in the Circular Church. The church itself was the beginning of the churches in Charleston, and as you stand here in the tower at Gordon Lantern, you can look out one window and see St. Philip's, the other window, and see the Unitarian Church, and we would be able to see the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, except that there's office buildings walking in. So we are being sandwiched in there. Just looking at this thing from the church's perspective, we are of course concerned about just being crowded here a little bit, as well as the traffic, of course, as we have to, parking there. I'm also a landscape architect, and looking at this project definitely checks off a lot of boxes for me in terms of urban design. I think the comments about the setback on King Street seem to be perfectly in order. But one thing about patterns here and urban design that we seem to be missing is uniquely Charlestonian. There is such a thing as a Charleston walk, where we combine parking garages with street side parking with parking lots in addition to garages, to create a mix of parking, and it's not just a giant parking garage. And so this is, to some extent, not respecting that pattern which Charleston is noted for. In terms of Horlbeck Alley, again, looking at it just as kind of my planner's hat, I worked on Charleston Place when it was first developed and been employed by it 3 different times since. And I'm really pleased to see that Horlbeck Alley is being activated with various uses. I wish they would do that on Market Street more myself at Charleston Place. But just looking at the shape of that space, if the width of that alley is not at least 50% of the height of the buildings around it, this can. I'm not sure about the zoning ordinance, whether 10 feet is adequate, but it looks like it's a little shy in that respect. And so just to kind of remind people of that basic kind of formula for figuring the width of it that goes beyond just zoning, so that we get the effect that you're looking for. In any case, I'm really excited about the prospect of an active development there with stuff going on. And we really would like to see that and would like to participate in that. There are some concerns, like everybody else, for a particular kind of approach that may be more uniquely Charleston in this respect, and not just a general urban design. And then lastly, just putting on my landscape engineering hat, one of the things in the Dutch dialogues was that this area on Meeting Street would become essentially an area where we could hold water to keep it from draining into lower lying areas. And as we all see, they have a parking garage in the basement. We have a basement at Circular Church. We have a dry area. This is a great area for stormwater reinfiltration, which should be part of our overall drainage master plan. And I'm not sure whether the drainage master plan has actually caught up with the zoning for this in that respect. And so I would like at some point for someone to at least consider the need for on-site stormwater retention, particularly now that we have covered the whole thing, the whole lot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Yes, sir.
My name is Sam Spence from the Preservation Society of Charleston, 147, being right around the corner from the city. The site at 155 Main Street represents one of the most significant proposed redevelopment projects that this part of the historic district has seen in some time. But simply, granting the request before Planning Commission today would facilitate a massive increase in intensity in an already challenged area just steps from some of the city's most historic sites. The request to upzone height to 70 stories across much of the property, 8 stories possibly down the road, and increase the number of allowed hotel rooms is all proposed on a site that's less than 2 acres along one of the most highly visible historic streets in downtown Charleston. Just to name a few places, like Mr. Ward just said, Circular Congregational Church, Gibbs Museum of Art, and Potter Magazine, City Market Sheds, and other sites sit within a block of this site. And the building's proximity to the Meeting Street Inn, just to the north, and the King Street Business District to the west, mean that any requests for more intense development on this site deserve the utmost scrutiny to evaluate lasting impacts to the historic context of the area. The Planning Commission is directed by City Code to evaluate these requests based on the character of the immediate area and possible effects to the property, neighborhood, and community. Further, this site, as Mr. Morgan said, is designated as city center in the comp plan, which calls for development to be directed dependent on the surrounding context. If you walk along Meeting, as you've seen in some of the slides, you see mostly 3- and 4-story buildings. And yes, you do see some disruptions in the historic context of this area, notably some nondescript offices and that 6-story building to the south on Holbeck Alley. But the existence of those buildings that are incompatible with the historic context do not bind this planning commission to make those disruptions worse, and in turn make it harder for future planning commissions to make sound rezoning decisions for sensitive land use in the historic district. The Meeting Street streetscape, particularly north from Holbeck Alley, has a very consistent rhythm that's reinforced by the existing 4-story height district, or the existing height district along Meeting Street, along this side of the property. And while we appreciate the applicant team's clear communication about their intention to pursue an 8th-story at the Board of Architectural Review, if today's rezoning request is approved, combined with the proposed scale and intensity of this development, it could be significantly detrimental to the character of the historic context. And in particular, we're concerned about the structure looming over the 3-story neighbor at Meeting Street Inn to the north and exacerbating the already cavernous conditions of Holbeck Alley to the south. And some of those applicant slides really depict some of those conditions. Therefore, we believe that the existing zoning of 4 and 6 stories on this site is appropriate for the prevailing context, and we urge the commission to uphold the integrity of the height districts as drawn. On the question of the accommodations use, though, while this property currently contains an accommodations use, the proposed increase in units is inappropriate given the high concentration of hotels already existing in this area. Just to list them, as Mr. Whitman just said, the King's Courtyard Inn, Fulton Lane Inn, Meeting Street Inn, all 3 of which are immediately adjacent to this property, in addition to the Charleston Place, Planters Inn, the Church Street Inn, the Mills House Hotel, are all within 1 or 2 blocks of this site. So it's our view the commission should hold the line against the proliferation of the highly intensive accommodations uses at a time when downtown Charleston does face a significant housing shortage and loss of neighborhood-serving businesses. Allowing a development of this proposed intensity on the site could have significant ramifications on our unique historic environment and pave the way for equally intense, similarly scaled developments in the future. We strongly believe that the request to upzone the accommodation zone and height districts does not meet the intent of the ordinance to provide to protect the character of our community, and we urge you to recommend this approval of this application.
Thank you, sir, for coming. Anyone else in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Go away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Passion Dryland with Historic Charleston Foundation, 40 East Bay Street. HCF is really energized by the proposed redevelopment of what we think is a languishing site in the heart of the business district and historic area. And we extend our appreciation to the applicant for reaching out to us on multiple occasions and sharing information well in advance of this meeting this evening. We are supportive of the height rezoning along the Meeting Street facing portions of the site. We believe the rezoning from 4 and 6 stories to 5 stories will enable better architecture for the southeast corner of the site. And the 3-story height of the building to the north appropriately addresses neighboring building scale. While we remain dedicated to a healthy and diverse mix of uses on the peninsula, and we are typically, as y'all know, reticent to grow accommodations uses, we're also supportive of the zoning map change from A1 to 5 to the site with a maximum total of 150 transient rooms or units. However, HCF is opposed to the height rezoning for the central portion of the block from 6 to 7 stories. Though the property is designated as city center, it's located in the Old Historic District and within a National Landmark District, a really historically sensitive area at the heart of the peninsula's business district. As Mr. Morgan pointed out, Ordinance Section 54-30615 empowers the Planning Commission to evaluate height rezoning requests on context, character of the immediate area, street widths around the property, and compatibility with surrounding properties. This rezoning request from 6 to 7 stories, with the potential to get 8 from the Board of Architectural Review for architectural merit, we just don't think it's appropriate for the context and character of this area of the city. Buildings of 7 stories, potentially 8, are just too tall for south of Calhoun Street and even more so south of Market Street. We also have strong concerns about the precedent that could set. Because of the site's location and adjacency to historic properties along King, Meeting, and Market Streets, we would encourage the commission to reject the height rezoning for the central portion.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Anyone else in opposition? Yes, sir, come on up. Sorry. Anyone else in opposition? If not, would the applicant like to respond?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry? Sorry? Yeah, I thought I did. Yeah, I did know that. Was anyone, I'm sorry if I missed, was anyone in support? I said there was 3 letters of support. Was anyone here in support who want to speak? Yeah, sorry, no problem. Sorry.
No. And in those letters of support, there are a couple from neighboring commercial property owners, and also one from the French Quarter Association, which is near. So there's a lot to speak to there. The context, of course, is paramount, and that's why we're really trying to design something that is respectful and deferential to the context, and that's, as Steve explained, that's really driving how we looked at this. Number of specific points I want to hit, but with regard to the accommodations overlay and going to 8.5, we just want to say, of course, that's right. The zoning ordinance is designed to avoid displacing other uses with hotel. We, of course, this already is a hotel use, but we're actually bringing additional uses to the site. And so just want to be clear about that. We agree, a mixed use is exactly what is called for here, and we want to do that. The holdback is obviously a really important point. There are a couple of points we're talking about on holdback. I think one is the concern about handling, the others concern about both traffic and sidewalk experience. And the residents nearby, the residents who live on holdback, they're 100% right. It's a bad situation presently. We are really trying to improve that and to create a functional sidewalk. Just to be clear, right now the zoning on rollback there it's 4 stories on the first 50 feet, and then 6 stories for the balance of our property. My point is simply this: what we're talking about and asking for this evening, it's not that we're going from 2 stories on holdback to 7 stories. Right now it's 7 to 6 stories. We're proposing to actually move back from the street, create more public realm, more space in there. So those are very valid, legitimate concerns. My point is, we're actually trying to improve those, try to move those in the right direction. So just want everyone to think about what the existing zoning is right now. We're trying to move that in the right direction. And the 7 stories that we are proposing, if you look at this, we're proposing to actually set it back further 5 stories at the corner, and this was part of Mr. Moore's comments and recommendation. What he was describing was, in our proposal, that 5-story district comes all the way down the floor back there. I think, Ms. Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong, what he was describing is there could be a 10-foot section that would remain as a 4-story piece of floor back there. Our belief is exactly, the ordinance already describes what the sidewalk requirements are. We aren't trying to create sidewalks for tight zones. We think this is kind of a cleaner way to do it. And frankly, we think that's something that's better left to VAR. Exactly what that should look like is also obviously BZA and health foundation throughout the process. So we just think that creates a little bit of an awkward situation there. But we are 100% committed to a sidewalk, open air, and expanding that. A couple other points in terms of traffic. We spent a lot of time talking to city staff about this, and our goal will be to move traffic. Right now, traffic enters in and out of the Days Inn from Meeting Street. Our goal will be to basically provide for that, and then from that entrance plaza area to be able to get down into parking. My point is, we are highly aware of and sensitive to back and how to manage that. We're going to go through the PRC process, the BZA process. We're going to figure out the best way to manage that. But we do already have 124 accommodations units, and then the public parking. As far as the public parking goes, if the city decides we don't want you to add more public parking, that's certainly fine to do. So we're not trying to force that. We're just trying to make sure there's sufficient parking that accommodates retailers on King Street and otherwise. There's just a couple of points that I want to emphasize as far as the 7 stories. And one is, and this is already on this, the comprehensive plan, which, as you all know, is sort of our starting point for guys to zoning. It designates this as city center, which, again, as you all know, is the most dense, the most height. It's deliberately on the highest elevation in the city. The downtown plan, which is effectively incorporated into the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance reads that this is to reinforce the principles cited in the downtown plan that higher structures be located along spine streets on the peninsula with heights of structures tapering down toward the water's edge. This is, of course, the spine, the piece where the comprehensive plan and the downtown plan, the zoning calls for height. We are, of course, very deliberately trying to increase the setback. So right now, typically they're 25 and 50 foot setbacks, as you all know, when you go from a lot of times the street height up to more height on the interior of the block. We doubled that. We went from 50 to 100 feet to really push it back, more so than other buildings. The last 2 points I make are one, part of what's going on here is we're trying to pull back and open up this site and make it pedestrian friendly and interactive. And pulling back and doing that, we're trying to move some of the height onto the top of the building, move some of that to the top of the building, but to set it back, that's largely not going to be experienced by pedestrians or drivers. I think this is, as you all have seen before, this is a smaller scale, but a similar concept on above Calhoun Street with the low line. There have been projects that I think you all are familiar with where the idea has been to pull back the big one with the low line, but then do a little bit more height up. The last thing that I would say is that everybody's correctly pointed out that our ordinance says when you think about height changes, west of rezoning will be compatible with surrounding properties. So that's the context. It says we'll look at the street. Meeting Street right here is one of our widest streets in the city. we look at the setbacks, we're doubling that setback from 50 to up to 100 feet. And then the existing context, as Steve described, at the corner, there already are 4, 5, and 6-story buildings at that corner. So we really think that as to provide that location is appropriate, as you see, we're coming down on the north side. On the King Street side, and this would make a point there as well. I'm sure you're paying attention to King Street and one about us. The setback on the King Street side is actually 125 feet. And so that's deeper than what's on Meeting Street. So the current 6-story district that you see here, that this distance is 125 feet there. But my point is that's already a very large setback, and in fact, that's already permitted for 6 stories there. And so understand, it's the same point before, but understand the concern that actually is there and deliberately set back really far to generally make it not visible. That doesn't mean that people looking out the back of a building on King Street can't see it. Of course it can. But generally, it's not an effective pedestrian experience on King. Just the last thing I'll say is that we believe that when you look at the actual context, you look at the other buildings in this fine area, you look at Charleston Place, the office building 151 Meeting, Mills House, the county office building. Most people have no idea that there's actually a 7-story piece of the county office building, and with good reason, because it's well set back behind other buildings. If you look at the context of what we have, we believe that what we're doing is appropriate and compatible. And we, of course, welcome any questions. We respectfully request your approval. As you're deliberating, please don't hesitate to ask any of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. That'll close the public aspect of this. I'm going to ask commission members for comments, questions, motions. We'll be bashful.
Christopher, can you get back to the slide, one of the first or second slides in your presentation where it lists what our charge is? Talks about compatibility and context. I can't read it.
I'll read it. It says, request to rezone to higher height district shall be evaluated in part on the context of the property, the character of the immediate area, street widths around the property, and whether the requested rezoning will be compatible with surrounding properties.
I thought about that statement or those requirements during the presentation and a lot of the comments. And I feel like I think it was this gentleman who's the landscape architect, even said in his statement of opposition that it still checks a lot of boxes for him. And it does for me. As I think about that, I think it all comes down to your own judgment about context. I think, well, first of all, I think there's also universal agreement, at least that I've heard, that the existing site is pretty terrible and we'd love to see something better. I actually stayed in that hotel one time when we were having our tubs replaced, and I think it was gross back in about 1989. So it is past due. But I'm not at all bothered by going from 124 to 150 hotel units on an existing hotel site, particularly one where there are actually multiple sites there. I thought that was important information. I think there are a lot of accommodations uses in the surrounding area, and so I think from that perspective, context or compatibility seems reasonable. And, aside from hearing some of the concerns about the height, I'm not even sure I have any real concern about increasing height, particularly in the way that it's been described. I think what I wrestle with is something that's beyond our control on this board, and that's what it's going to look like. And so the pressure then, if we approve a height change, we're sort of doing so based on the hope and belief that the architecture team is going to pull off something that creates a positive context for whatever the next thing is. And so I'm not going to make a motion yet. I just want to say that I'm struggling more with ensuring that if the height change is approved, what gets built there, and I have no doubt whatever gets built will be nicer looking than the Days Inn, but that it is a beautiful new large building in the city of Charleston instead of something that is plain and vanilla that seems to be. I really think when we hear from our friends and neighbors that they just hate all these new big buildings, I don't think they really truly hate the big buildings all the time. I think they hate the new big ugly plain looking buildings. So those are my comments right now. I appreciate it.
One thing I was going to say when you mentioned that is the BAR and scrutinize the project. So if we approve, we'll have to go through BAR. And you seen the one on Calhoun, where somebody gets offended and rejected 3 times. Hope they're not your clients for some anyway. So they are scrutinizing things big, and I feel certain that if we would approve, I'm concerned about the finished product, but they, with much emphasis, you tell you, they'll scrutinize this. Ms. Jacobs, go ahead.
I have some questions for clarity. I heard a lot of discussion with this height that you're parking above ground, but I thought I heard you say you're parking underground. Is this correct?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. So a significant amount of parking is underground, and the extent that is the hotel parking, and that will be accessed from kind of the interior porte-cochere area. And then there is planned to be some parking above grade, about 3 stories along Furlbeck, but it's not the entire footprint. It's a much smaller footprint.
And then you've spoken a lot about taking the accommodations to 150 in a situation where you essentially almost have 150. But you mentioned residential units, but there was never any discussion about the number of residential units in addition to
Where
this
they'd be.
accommodation. So I think I would like to hear what that number was.
Of course, sorry, I elaborated more on that. So, there would be the number that we've described in our 22 is there would be up to around 40 residential units. So, and the way that the client has done this type of project before is to put those residential units on the top floors of the building. So the hotel is on lower floors, and then there would be right. And the way it typically works is there's a separate sort of residential lobby and elevator bank that takes you up to the top.
Doesn't that exceed the 150 that is allowed?
No, I'm sorry. Great question. Absolutely 100%. There can only be 150 units that are leased for short-term accommodations units. So conceivably, we could decide, well, let's do 140 actual typical hotel rooms, and then say take 10 of the 40 residences and have those be able to be leased on the short term. But no matter what, you cannot have more than 150 units that be leased on short term.
All residential units would be true residential units, not also the short-term residential.
Right, they are true residences. They will have kitchens, living spaces.
There'll be leases.
Well, they'd be leased or self-sold.
Probably to be determined, but they certainly could be sold. And I think the expectation is that that's probably the direction that we go. you'll see if you want to poke around, some hotel, higher-end hotel brands like Four Seasons or Ritz and others have residences components to their projects that can be purchased. And the owners of those units have access to the amenities of the hotel. If I'm making sense.
I have a few questions for staff, just maybe for clarity. We've heard a little bit of mention about stormwater, but with the new stormwater manual, they'll be required to go through the city process with our new stormwater, which essentially encumbers them to manage all that on the site.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Just for the record?
They have to manage more of the stormwater on site than
Okay,
the
they have to do
permit.
that all on
Yeah.
site, okay.
There's a multiplier.
And then, there was some suggestion in one of the comments that they're, from the Historic Charleston Foundation, that they're for this and not for that, but are we allowed to cherry pick, like we give approval for something and not approval for something else in this
That's your
application?
purview. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the ability to cherry pick.
Depends on the way the motion passed.
Exactly, I just didn't know.
Okay, anything else, Ms. Jacobs?
And they speak a lot about mixed use on the site, but this zoning doesn't really encumber them to absolutely do that. That's just them telling us they have a strong intention. But there's absolutely nothing at the end of the day, if we approve this, that would encumber mixed use on the site. Basically, could all be a hotel up to 150 units if that's what we decide to do.
And it is accommodations already. It's just allowed to 124.
And then the last thing, question I have is we have a request to parcel the project into three separate height districts. There's been a lot of discussion with the intent to go to VAR and ask for additional height. But is that can that happen in all three of those districts now, or just the 7? Is that, where's your intent?
It absolutely. As you know, the zoning district don't allow you to kind of write this into the code, but we are 100% publicly committed. That 3 stories means 3 stories, 5 stories, and 5 stories.
We committed to what you.
Absolutely. And if we got to the VAR and we said, well, we think 5 should really be 5.5, I'm confident that people here would say, no. They told planning commission that 5 is 5, and that's it. On the 7th floor, though, that's right. We do want to at least look at, as we are, can we have a small piece of 8 story on top of the 7th story. What we talked about is we no more than 25% of the building footprint set back even further than 100 feet, 125 feet. In other words, really trying to make that totally invisible. And so we want to be totally transparent. We would like to ask the DAR if we can do that, but absolutely no more height on the.
What would you have up there?
I think it would basically be sort of a access to rooftop area.
Mechanical, yeah, right.
Yeah, but again, if we convince the city, when we go through the BZA process for a hotel approval, the city staff has, what they refer to as the rules that were generated by a prior hotel. And we are 100% receptive to that. In other words, we're going to have our residences up there. We want this to be a pleasant place. So this is 100% telling you and telling the BZA that those are top line.
Appreciate it. Ms. Jacobs, is that it? Or you got nothing else?
And hold on. I know that we cannot commit here, but I do hope that if you're saying you're going to do mixed use, that you will follow through with that discussion. And it was, I don't remember the other thing because I lost it in the translation.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Ms. Questions?
I have a question both for the applicant and to staff. I know you're considering part of the leased parking spaces in your parking requirement. How long is that lease for, and how will you incorporate that into the future? Or is this kind of for the approval process, and then what happens?
Sorry, so it's a little complicated, but the lease the parking lots in the rear that will be incorporated in this project, they will actually ultimately be folded into the project, meaning that I never referred to parking lot. It's, the parcels in the back, we actually own one of them already, and the other two will be long-term ground lease, but ultimately those essentially, this way to say is those get folded into the project, and the ownership of those spaces ultimately, the parking deck in the building ultimately belong to that owner. But they don't go through, they are permanently part of the project. Does that make sense?
So it's not leased. It's leased now, but it will not be leased.
So on a ground lease, it's more than you want, but on a ground lease, it's where you build on the ground, you build on the ground lease. If the improvements are permanent, they stay there, then the ground lease, the improvements refer to the ground lessor. That's not quite the case here. The ground lessor in this instance will ultimately parking spaces within the building. But they are own parking spaces. They never disappear. But, so I'm not sure I'm saying that or not.
With your help, I mean, it's definitely helping the answer. I just a little confusing.
You have a question for staff? You said for staff.
No, it's
That was
in
it.
reference to the lease. I mean, I was concerned that the lease space was just a part of the approval process. And then in 10 years, you never said ground lease or you never said anything. So
Right.
that's just the real estate side.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson.
And I did remember my comment.
Okay.
If I may.
Let me do this. Let me see if any other commissioners members first, and then I'll come back to
I guess this is more of a comment than a question because Mr. Wilson kind of addressed my question about what would happen on Meeting Street and your commitment to doing 3 stories and 5 stories is ironclad. The only thing that really concerns me here, the accommodations it's not a concern, is the character of Bullback Alley in this issue of canyonization. And I don't know that really, honestly, the 6-story building with the current height district there would also produce a canyon. So I think the best we can do is what the ordinance allows, and that is that 10-foot setback and a generous sidewalk. Anyway, I don't know that there's, I mean, getting the business of slicing that height district off a little further in from Horlbeck, but anyway, that's more of a comment than a question. And I'm curious what the rest of my commissioners think.
Yeah, I had a similar concern just about that corner at Meeting and Horlbeck Alley. I don't know if I love the idea of the scale, but like you said, it's already zoned for 6 stories, so who knows what could go up there. I had a question for you just about, you had made a comment before about, I think it was a little bit of a modification to the application regarding that setback. Well, can you just review that again?
So from a staff standpoint, what we would suggest is that the entire length of the project along Horlbeck have a 10-foot setback from these height changes. So where the height changes from 4 stories to 5 at the front, and where it changes from 6 to 7 at the rear, all of that have a 10-foot setback. Just to respect the fact that they are going to have a 10-foot sidewalk down at the street level.
So it would be the 10-foot sidewalk plus another 10 feet.
No, it would be where the 10-foot sidewalk would be. It's just to assure and make it clear as part of the height going forward that the expectation is there that 10 feet will be left along Horlbeck.
What other stipulations do you have in your recommendation?
That was
in the set.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
good.
Entire length of Horlbeck of that 10 foot.
From Meeting Street all the way back.
From Meeting Street to the back of the park, correct.
Yeah, you good?
No, that answers it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Ramos, I think. I don't know if you've shown a rendering of what the back part, the 7-foot building would look like from King Street, where King's Inn is. I've sat back there on that black bench for 15 years and I've eaten lunch and I parked in the 6-story building for 15 years, and I tripped and fallen, and I've seen them iron their clothes on that balcony of the Days Inn for 15 years. And it's just that, you know, looking at whole back alley and just seeing what needs to be done in that space. Do you have anything like a rendering to show what it will look like from King Street, looking at the Days Inn from the back? How would that look? What would that look like? Because I'm just having a hard time seeing that and visualizing that, being that it's already a congested area. When you come off of, Chris, can you come show your rendering? When you come off of Meeting Street and you turn right onto Holback, it's there is no sidewalk along where the restaurant sits on the very corner. So pedestrians are already walking in the streets. And so as you go back, there's the parking. Can you go back to it? The one with
Which one?
that one. So as you're going back, the 7 stories will go right there on the back end. Is that correct? Is that what I'm saying?
Christopher?
Yeah.
It might be helpful if you went to the slide that shows what Steve was showing, like the H shape.
I think the H rendering would be great.
And the one thing I'll caution on these is this is their concept for the property. This does not, there is nothing about these height changes that requires them to do this H shape that you're seeing here. So just remember, it's more about the boxes of what the maximum of the heights are.
Gotcha, but the 7 stories would be on the back, this part, right? The left side, right?
Whole H, isn't it? 7 stories.
Oh, the whole H is
Whole
7
H is
stories.
7 stories.
Okay,
Yeah, the light pink colors.
I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time seeing it from where I'm sitting, maybe. Okay, and so how far back will that go with the parking lot that you share with the hotel behind the Days Inn?
Yeah, so happy to address that. So that was the 125 feet that Mr. Wilson mentioned, that H shape is set back 125 feet from Q Street. And so the instances where you would see the building would be if you're looking down Throwback Alley, or if you're looking down Fort Lane. Otherwise, the buildings that are on King Street are tall enough to shield that mass.
The 7 stories?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
There's
Well, that gives me a better visual.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, so if you look, so here, here's that 7-story mass, and then here are the buildings on King Street, which in many cases are 2 or 3 stories. But even with that height and the substantial setback, you're not going to see that building.
And King Street Inn, that's behind the Days Inn, how tall is that building?
If the King's Courtyard Inn.
King's, yeah, that's.
I believe it's a 3-story building.
Okay.
And again, because the setback is so significant, even with a 3-story building, if you're sitting on that bench, you're not going to see it unless you were to be up inside the building on the roof. And one comment that the canyon discussion was a bit pretty prevalent, and just one thing I wanted to say is that
If you answer the questions, that's good. I don't want to get back into going back into the.
And that did, yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair, but that did give me a better visual because I'm struggling with the stories on the back end. And we've already gone over and hashed out the setback for the sidewalk, but I was really struggling with, it just seems like it's just really gonna overshadow those properties right along the parking garage, those condos that are there, and then coming from King Street up the alley. It's just, I just can't see it maybe, but I just wanted to make sure I at least got some type of understanding of what was gonna be done there.
I have a couple of questions. Where's the entrance? That question was asked earlier by one of the
Where those, where the parking garage, what a gentleman.
Yeah, how do you
I
get
asked, but I haven't heard where that is.
What do you perceive that?
if you could, there's a site plan drawing, I think it's
Go back to H.
And I caution the commission.
Yeah.
This is just a concept
Yeah.
here.
No, I know.
It's not under y'all's purview. It's not
So-
doing the heights.
Absolutely.
Most people will be coming from probably the north, from like the airport, for example, and they would enter the site on Union Street here. The lobby is here and the porte cochere would be here, so this will be all valet parking. So if you were visiting, you would exit your car here. The actual hotel garage entrance is going to be kind of tucked under here. So your car would go into the garage from this point here, but the main entrance is in that location.
And as the cars leave the garage.
Sir?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah. Again, this is conceptual, so it's not final. As Mr. Morgan said, this still would have to go for some other boards. So we could, if we talked about it, it would change. I hate to say, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Because they will have two processes on this. They have to get the accommodations overlay special exception, which will look at where vehicular entrances are, how the parking works, loading, unloading, all those types of things. And then, of course, they'll have the full BAR review of the structures.
Ms. Jacobs?
I'm glad that Commissioner Brian Jenkins brought up the King Street, because that's the point I forgot, was that one of my heartburns here was the reference of the back of the property. I always think about back doors, and technically the back door of this project is the back door of King Street, and the scale differential there is quite large, and they've already been transparent in the request of 8 stories. Most likely that 8-story won't be all central, they presume that, but they may find it easier, so all of a sudden the back of all of that is 8 stories, even though the setback is correct. I'm having the biggest heartburn. That's why I asked about the cherry picking, because I'm sort of comfortable with everything else, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with granting 7 stories. Know that we are going to go 8 stories, and since we're not a design review board, even though that plays a strong influence to us, we just have to look what's appropriate for the property, and we have to anticipate worst case scenarios for that design based on how we say the context of the land is. So that's where I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain.
I was just asking Mr. Morgan if you would put up your recommendation.
Sure.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve this based on the staff's recommendation,
Which includes that 10-foot setback.
correct. And we can all see approval to change from accommodations overlay 1 to 5, approval of 10-foot setback for property along the rollback for height district changes from 6 to 7 as shown and 4 to 5 as shown.
Okay, and I have a question before we have a second.
Yeah.
Is there any way in this, and I know this isn't in our purview, but is there any way that we can get a recommendation that the 3-foot will not be increased, or, that the lower, what you just mentioned, that the 7-foot will go to 8-foot, that would be 25%.
Assurances before we went to BAR, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, we can write it up as the staff recommend, to include it, so that the worst case scenario does not happen.
The 4 stories to 3?
No, it can't go in an additional story based on,
Won't go beyond 7?
well, no, that on the lower stories won't go higher.
3
Oh, I
stories
see
and
what you're
5
saying.
stories.
Yeah, that would be conditioning it in a way that I don't think you all can do.
But I think that will be in the minutes of the meeting, and I invite our preservation groups to hold them accountable to that.
I'm gonna second Mr. Hussain's motion. I think this is like a city, it was city center, and this project has the potential, like a Charleston hotel, to really do something positive for that area. I know there's concerns, and there should be concerns, but I think that I don't think the accommodations issue doesn't concern me so much. I know it's an issue, and there's a few rooms here and a few rooms there, and if they add up, I understand the concerns and the Preservation Society and Historic Charleston Foundation. I appreciate those concerns. I think the way that the setbacks would be proposed, I think that we won't know, just like I walk by some places, you don't know that there are stories there. You just don't know it. So I'm going to second Mr. Hussain's motion, staff recommendation.
I'd like to maybe add, and it's okay with Mr. Hussain, that we add in your recommendation that the 5-foot goes straight to all back, the recommendation that you have made.
I think
And that's stated.
Part of that is part of it.
Yeah, it's
10%. That's part of the already. You made a motion on staff. Thank you.
I'd like to, I'm gonna vote for it. I think that we have a give and take here. And, they're lowering down next to the pink house so that we can keep that the way it is. And then we don't want to see a 4 and a 6 in a box. We really don't. I mean, looking at that building across the street always bothers me that that ever got approved. I hope it didn't get approved, because I've been on this commission, but
That'd be a long time.
but I do believe that we have to give and take, and it sounds like their proposal is taking into consideration so many of the aspects that we would like to see. I don't want to see a 4 and 6 foot block. I really don't. I want to see some interest and some, and we're not the AR, but we still are concerned with the context as we read. So I think y'all have done a very good job explaining it, and I just hope that that's what you follow through with.
Yeah.
So I will also vote.
Mr. Wilson will be before us again sometime, I'm sure. We'll make sure we're.
One submission also that I'm going to repeat something that Jimmy Bailey said, Mr. Bailey said, is that we have very good memories up here. So we can promise things on the minutes to the community and for future things. Please follow through with your commitments, because our memories up here are getting better and better all the time.
You couldn't even remember the things on your list.
Trusting you to remember.
Mr. Wilson knows we're gonna hold him accountable. Other comments, questions?
I do have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Slow us down.
Go ahead.
Christopher, can you slide back to the one that shows the section of the building? I thought it was a good slide. And I just want to make sure I'm correct. That one.
This one?
Yes. I think Mr. Lasane's comment, was that what is available to them today is basically that. They're just asking for that. Is that a correct statement?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Any other questions?
I would just say, I came into this with some questions and real concerns, and I think this discussion has really helped address those. So I'm grateful to my colleagues for the commission.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, comments, we would take a vote. All in favor of the motion by Mr. Lasane, seconded by me, to recommend staff's approval, which includes the 10-foot setback. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone in opposition? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor and none opposed. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for the topic.
Let's more on the zoning. Can we take any of the zonings together?
Yeah.
I'm going to read the, Mr. Member, I'll read the zonings into the record. Zoning, you take 1, 2, and 3 together. Number 1 is 39 Riverdale Drive, Avondale, Passy, EMS. Number 418140061 for 30 acres. That's all the questions. Zoning is R1 County. Number 2 is 48 Magnolia Road, Carolina Terrace, West Texas, EMS number 418100151, 47 acres. West SR1 of R1 County. Number 3 is 635 Magnolia Road, Carolina Terrace, West Texas, EMS number 4181. I'm gonna get these zeros wrong. 00033 for 34 acres. Present zoning SR1, City of Charleston, North Warren County. We're taking 1, 2, 3 together. Mr. Morgan.
And then number 8 is actually 353130031.
Oh, sorry, that's the one over there. Thank you.
Yep. And yeah, staff recommends the SR1 for all of these.
Anyone like to be heard? Not? Ms. Jacobs?
I move for approval.
Great. Second by Ms. Lentz. Did you second?
I second.
Okay, great. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone not possessing, that's 7 in favor, none opposed.
of our annexation coordinator, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Why number 4 was deferred, I'm curious.
Is this the Beacon Way? Number 4 was deferred by the residents' choice. They decided that rather, they would like to keep their options open in terms of short-term rental in the future. They don't like the idea that in order to legally operate a short-term rental, they would be directed to be at the residence. They want to be able to leave the house.
The city is tighter on short-term rentals in the county.
Yes, I just wanted that on the record, thank you.
That completes the zoning's minutes. Ms. Jacobs, you're my minutes expert. Have you had a chance to peruse the minutes with any corrections or additions? And if so, would you make a motion?
There's only one
It's October,
that there's only one I did read, and it was quite late.
Yes, October.
Meeting, and I did.
Okay.
It was obvious.
So October the 19th, 2022, motion on that?
I'll move for approval.
Great. Is that second? I'll say. Ms. Joyce is second. No, I'm gonna let Ms. Joyce say. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Listen, Ms. Jacobs looked over and okay?
Yeah, but they're not all included.
No, I just said October 19th, 2022. The only other thing is, that we have on the agenda is to continue any discussion that we'd like to have. We started last month talking about any changes, any guidelines we want to have for planning commission in terms of the meeting. We talked about this last month, and I can say that I feel comfortable that I think the meetings run right. I think we have a good process that works. I know that the things that Ms. Jacobson had sent out regarding those 2 issues that were common in all of them, of the different meetings she sent out. One was people sign up, and people have their time limits. I don't think we've had a sign up, and I don't think we need it. And the time limits, I think we should, if we have which we're going to have some big meetings with Union Pier, I would get with our vice chairman, Mr. Hussein, we'd come up with something, because we will have time limits. We will have to have time limits. There's no question. We'll have to see how many hundreds of people will want to speak at that thing and decide how long that, after we can't. But I don't want to cut them, can't cut them. We have to get what they have to say. But whether a presentation site, Stuart Charleston, is a little longer, I think they should, and organizations should have longer to speak versus just an individual or association. But that's something I think you and Mr. Hussein we're going to talk about and try to iron out. But other comments or questions about procedure or?
Well, I have to say, I thought about this for a long time, because I have sat in meetings as a participant for a long time. And I'm also, I'm now on the commission. And there's a couple of dynamics here. One is I noticed that, and I even noticed it on our agenda today, and it really began to bother me again. The public is encouraged to attend the meeting in person to speak in order for comments to be fully heard. Well, that's an impossibility for a lot of people. And we had a commission meeting where there were 150 comments written and barely acknowledged or reviewed for the record. In other words, during the Zoom meetings, we used to read in all the comments that were written. I don't think that's appropriate, but in order to give the impression that to be fully heard, you need to be in attendance. You need to figure out the weight properly for written comments. Maybe some summarization or something that's not everybody.
I don't want to change anybody's comments. I think Ms. Slane can have some comment, of course, on that, but I don't want to change anybody's comments.
No, I think it's in fairness, we need to weight them equally. I don't think people should be told the only way they're fully heard is to attend the meeting. One, I think that's real important, because to come from Pinchland and Johns Island, I remember one night we sat down in Southwick, and a woman had to get a babysitter for her special needs daughter to come here and sit through very lengthy meeting just to speak. We need to respect the time of the people that come with a policy of some sort. And I looked in our ordinance, we have a policy. And I think what began to bother me is we're not following the policy. And I really don't have a dog about what the policy is, but I think we should have some sort of policy that's continuously used, that might even become part of the agenda, where it says, you know, if you come, this is going to be how you can speak at the meeting. You're told how to write in comments. You barely reference the written comments, but we're never told how to act when you come to speak. So I think we just, in face of the zoning code rewrite, the peninsula plan, Union Pier, it would be helpful for the public to understand how best to be heard equally. That's more about what I'm talking about. It sort of has gotten off like I want some sort of time limit, and I don't. To that we don't pick winners and losers like this meeting. We give this grace and that meeting, we give that grace. That we have an equal weight to public comment and presentation at the meeting, that everybody understands and respects, either to write in or to come to speak before us. I think it's just an equality issue that I'm more concerned about now, because I've been on the other side of meetings and sat through 3 hours just to kind of maybe not be heard because people were tired. And if there had been a shorter meeting, maybe everybody would have been given weight. This sort of thing, I just think we need to start respecting that, because some of the things that we're going to be facing, and then the consequence ripples of those things will cause.
Right, Mr. Lassane, I'm sorry, I didn't catch you all.
No, I was just going to say, I respect and understand what Ms. Jacobs is saying. And I think there is probably a way we can acknowledge written comments. But the fact is, it's called a public hearing. First of all, I believe everybody should be given a chance to speak. We can urge them to be more brief and to not repeat and all those things. But at the end of the day, it's a public hearing. We're here to hear from the public. So I strongly believe, but I'm not discounting what you're saying. I don't think there's any way we can't prevent the spoken word from having more weight in a public hearing than I don't know how. I think it's our job as commissioners to review those public comments before the meeting, to internalize them. We should recognize them somehow, and I think we should all give input into how we do that, because I'm not entirely sure how we would do that. But I think it's a good goal, a good policy, so that the public who does come know that people did write, and this is what, this was the gist of what they said. And we were able to do that on the Zoom meetings, and I thought it was, as effective as it could be. And I think, as you said, these bigger meetings that we have coming up are going to have to be, we're going to have more management than we would at a meeting like tonight, where we had a fairly limited agenda. So anyway, I don't know that I've made any real points, but
is it Mr. Lassane and Harry? Can you guys can you guys when you have your discussion, like Donna is saying, can we acknowledge, say by the name and address, so that you publicly
maybe just read the name and address.
Exactly, instead of just summarizing the whole letter, because they can be lengthy, right?
Yeah.
And then that gives that person who's not able to attend a voice. Right. And so, like you're saying, this is a public meeting. They've been publicly recognized.
In addition to having that, we could say there were X amount opposed and X amount approved.
Right. Right, that makes sense.
So that way it's,
we'll take that one and read it. We'll have the clerk read,
just
50 names. He's pretty, whatever. And then, that's good.
But to Nell's point, this is a public hearing. This is the only place that these people get a chance to speak. And I've been here for a lot of years, and we have worked out a lot of things with what they have said to us. And I don't want to give that up, but I also don't want to waste to that person or the 35 other people that want to talk and talk and talk and talk. You're going to have to cut them off.
Right.
I mean, unless we tell them based on, if we think it's going to be a long meeting, I think we need to come up with some guidelines.
Right. Yeah, and I do think, I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off. I do think we can adjust, meeting by meeting. If it looks like there's going to be, if we've got a long agenda and the room is packed, we can say, we're going to have to, limited to 3 minutes or whatever. I think we reserve the right to do that.
Yeah, so,
Then I would recommend that we somehow amend our policy, because somebody could come in and say, wait a minute, you were supposed to give me 5 minutes, so tonight you're only giving me 3. And I just don't
I
want
hate to
us
put anything about time in the guy, in the, you know,
No,
because then
I'm
you
not
really
saying
run.
that we put, I'm saying that's what it says in our ordinance right now. If somebody could call us on that. I'm saying that we need to amend it to remove those things.
Can you do me a favor, because you've read this a lot of time? Can you make some recommendations, bring back to the next meeting, and let's talk about them as real recommendations?
We all can do that.
That would be
We all
helpful.
can do
Yeah,
that.
not
I
that
just think-
anybody,
I
all
think
look
that
at.
Our codified policies, you say one thing that we never
Right.
follow. And
Well,
I just don't
anything
want
you-
us to get us sideways with people.
I agree with you.
And,
You know, yeah.
We could remove time limits
Yeah, to
altogether.
Mr. Lasane's point, I don't know how many meetings I've been to, Ms. Lempis has been more than I have, that we've sat here and people have said it was just something they wanted very emotionally and they needed, and we've turned down or we supported something else that they didn't want. And I've had people say after the meeting, call me and say, you know, I didn't get what I wanted, but y'all heard it. Listen to me. And it's almost as he said, it's public hearing. So we heard, we did hear. So, Mr. Bailey, anything? You've been awful quiet down there. I don't want to cut you off.
I think that if any of us have any specific suggestions, we should send them to you.
Yes.
And, you know, you could probably sort through half of them with staff and find that half of them are unworkable, but at least, you know, we could pare down any specific suggestions to discuss amongst ourselves.
Good idea.
And I think the idea, Quita, your suggestion about just reading at least the names and addresses and position and stuff, that's easy. That's a great suggestion.
Is there anything else?
Make a comment about that.
Yeah.
All right, so in the era of Facebook and social media, we got a hint of this with the rezoning request at Rutledge and Mount Pleasant Street. Things mushroom from social media, and you start getting lots and lots of written comments that are the same or go on for pages. It was incredible. You know, that was the greatest number of comments we've ever received on an issue, was that one case. And I would, from a staff standpoint, if we've got a 24-hour period, it may become difficult to summarize every single one of those comments.
Names and addresses.
You know, and what I'm saying is I think the system we've got where we're sending them to you all, you're seeing them, you know, I don't know, even reading the names and addresses may take a good bit of time. I don't know that is that achieving anything to say that this person at this address, you know, they have to come in person. And we had a different standard when things were COVID related, but now, you know, people pretty freely can come to meetings. Obviously, there are some limitations and things like that. So
We certainly don't want to add any more.
that was a good era of written comment.
I think we should consider that perspective too as we send specific suggestions.
Yes. So I think Mr. Bailey's idea is good. Any specific suggestions, please send with me and Mr. Lasane, and I'll take his brain, we'll talk through it and bring it up to the next meeting.
I think Mr. Karras needs to cut and paste each one of them and put them in the list for us.
If you wait for me, they send me a long
And the biggest issue is the condensed time we have. It's 24 hours in advance, which, you know, we can't make it a week in advance, you know.
Right. And nothing, if there's nothing else.
And we do know it's a lot easier to type something out real quick and, you know, you see that with social media, so that's.
If there's nothing else, we'll finish the agenda. Thank you for everyone's time. We'll stand adjourned. Did you have anything else? I see you sitting back there very patiently.
No. I just wanted to hear how this discussion was going. I think we submitted something for the public input.
I saw that. What were your thoughts? Because
I can't remember exactly what you said.
Preservation Society. Yes,
Yes,
if
sir,
you all
yeah.
wanted people, I think I remember seeing something that said you were appreciative people having a chance to be heard, I think.
Yes, yeah, and I think similar to what Robert was talking about earlier with Union Pier, using the commission's full authority to gather as much public input and erring on the side of collecting more possible.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and staying with us. Thank you. Great. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Very good. Thank you. Everything's good? Yes. That's baby. How old are you?